Hello and welcome. My name is Zeteo, and today we're going to be looking at another replay review. Today we're going to be looking at Juniper and Friends on RiverRun. Now note that this is a more like all is welcome kind of lobby, so there's a very mixed bag of people in this room. There's also already been some chats about plans, people trying to push on Flash or trying to push on PTAQ, and we'll see how that goes. Let's see, put it on your view, player view, and there we go. Okay, let's get into it. All right, looks like you're starting a 3-mex opener with some solar and a bot lab. All right, speed up a little bit. Note there is very high wind on this map, so wind is going to be good eventually. Now it's fine to put some solar down to get you started, but right now wind is very good, so actually you could start with some wind as well. Alright, so you end up going with wind because it's so high. I will note really quick, and this is not a bad thing for you or anything like that. I just wanted to briefly mention that usually the mexes are closer together. And if you try to do a build like this, you will stall building the wind turbine because you need energy to do it. But because these three mexes, that was a weird circle, but because these three mexes are so far away, you ended up building up enough energy anyways to get the wind in an okay time. Another way you could do this is instead of going for 3 mexes because they're so far away, you go for 2, add on your winds, and then build a bot lab. This is specific for bot labs because the units coming out don't take quite as much metal, and so you don't really need that bit of metal right away. Now it's nice to have that bit of income as you're building your lab because it takes a minute to build and stuff like that, and while you build your wins because they take a minute as well. So that kind of play would be more geared towards like trying to greed a little bit faster, and that'll just get your construction bots out sooner so that you can grab these metals faster. And by doing so, you'll you'll be able to basically push your economy forward a bit faster. But as it is, this is just fine. It looks like you're using the spacebar commands to insert wind turbines into the queue before the lab. So this is interesting. I don't usually see that. Usually people just cancel and stuff and forget about the spacebar. So it's kind of cool that you're doing it this way. But yeah, your bot lab's coming up, going down, whatever it may be. Here it is. Speeding up a little bit. Okay, add on some more winds as you need it. Resbot, good, so you can get those trees in the back. Grunts coming out. So one of the things I will note here is in this position you have this hill. And this hill is kind of it's nice to have, but at the same time should cause slightly different play. The reason being is, it's an obstruction. Anything like a radar can't see through it. Units can come from the bottom or from the top, so you kind of have to be mindful of both sides. Because if you defend just one side, now all of a sudden the bottom side is very vulnerable to attack. So what I would recommend is trying to station one of these grunts down here. That way, nothing that can come this early will get through, because the only things that can come this early are scouts. Ticks, rascals, and rovers. So a grunts would be able to deal with that, especially if you move them around to engage with them. The secondary grunts could be out here a little bit, or could be at fronts, more in the base to respond from possible attacks coming in from the top like this. But either way, you have a commander in this region to protect that stuff. Now, of course, the wind turbines also are like a wall, so the commander obviously can't shoot through them. So it is kind of nice to have a grunts in the region as well. But yeah, just as it is right now, these bottom 2 mexes are fairly vulnerable, and if a scout did go along this path, they could swing up here, take out this mex, no problem, come up here, take out this mex, no problem, and then even potentially move on to the wind turbines here. So it's just a bit of a vulnerability here. See, OBS is still recording, so that's good because apparently it's crashed on me earlier and I didn't even know about it, so I just kept going and yeah. All right, so wind is dipping down. You're adding on a solar. That's all very good. I will say though that because solars are so expensive, your bit of metal your metal's draining rather quickly because of them. You have 2 of them now. You're grabbing some back mexes, so that's all very good. I would say this guy here, I would prioritize instead of grabbing the back mexes, prioritize these mexes. Not because, obviously 2 mexes is less than 3. Like 3's nicer to have for economy, but because this position on the hill is so important for things like radar. Putting a radar in this kind of region will help you see like any of this. Well, maybe it wouldn't go quite that far, but you get the idea. The idea is to see what's coming more. And of course, having the awareness to do so is very important. So when I talk about awareness, I mean doing things like glancing at the minimap to see if enemies are coming by, or having your view zoomed out. Some players play rather zoomed out, but if you prefer not to play that way, trying to zoom out once in a while just to see, like, is there anything coming? Okay, no, okay, let's build some stuff. All right, is there stuff coming? No? Okay, let's build some stuff. And doing it that way will help you build the habits of, just checking very periodically to see if stuff's coming and respond to it properly. Which becomes very, very important as, you face off against harder and harder opponents. This con turret, I would say this con turret's a little bit early. Mainly because you don't really have the metal income to support it. So con turrets are basically like, you're spending, a significant amount. I wouldn't say it's that significant, but you're spending quite a bit on something that adds a lot of build power. Con turrets have 200 build power, whereas constructors only have 80. Of course, the commander has 300, so it's kind of nice to build this con turret before the commander moves out. But at the same time, this con turret can't help you with this. It can't help you build other mexes, it can't help you do a lot of things, and you can't really utilize all that build power right away. So what I argue is to instead, if it's this early in the game, instead get like a couple extra construction bots instead. And that way you can use those construction bots together to build all this really quickly. If you go less on the construction bots and get the turret, first of all, you'll build the turret kind of slowly. I mean, obviously right now you're building it fast because of the commander, but at some point, moving your commander out is very important. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but so you don't always have that 300 build power from the commander available to build the construction turret. And so if he's not available and you try to build with only one constructor, it takes quite a while. So to me, to get your commander out sooner and to not have this terribly early, you go with construction bots and assist the lab with the bots. And then if there's stuff like you need to add on these mexes, or so you're trying to grab some mexes out here and you lose the constructor to an attack, then you have replacements already ready to go that are assisting the lab. And then you can just like do something like use alt to insert a new constructor into the queue so that you replace one that's assisting, and you just grab one of the assisting ones to go do the job of the constructor that died. So it's just like a way to plan it out a little bit more like that, so that you don't have this super early construction turret. It's not a terrible thing to have this, it's just you're not going to be able to utilize it quite yet. And it's more ideal to have the commander out front. This here, I will say, is dangerous. And this is just, being a little bit nitpicky about placement. Which isn't terribly important right now, but in the long run and in future games, this can be fairly impactful. So when things die, they blow up. They do damage around them. That's um, you see things like wind turbines chain together and explode all at once. Not all at once, but like they chain one by one and destroy the whole line. Well, same thing happens with converters, and same thing happens with storages. The only difference is storages have more hit points, so they can withstand a couple of blows. But if you ever want to see the damage something does when it blows up, it's space and shift. If you hold those two down while selecting a unit, it tells you the death, explosion, and self-destruction here. So here the damage is 660 when it dies, 1060 if you self-destruct it. And you can see the ranges of these explosions if you hold X and shift. Now, it used to blink on the self-destruct one. I don't know if it's like bugging right now, but it doesn't show it. But I will note that the self-destruct one is usually the outside one, and that would be the one that used to blink. It would blink like between red and yellow to denote that it's the self-destruct radius. And then the solid yellow line, that's usually more in the center, is your upon death. So when this converter dies, it takes out, it deals 660 damage in this area, which means it's going to hit this wind turbine, it's going to hit this other converter, which also hits all these wind turbines, and it's going to deal damage to these energy storages. So that's 660 damage each within basically this area. And that's not quite enough to take out a storage on its own, but if there's a couple of extra units around, it could take out the storage, and the storage itself deals another basically 1,000 damage, and it's within a bigger radius. So not only will you lose all your wind turbines, but you'll deal significant damage to your bot lab and mechs. And also notes these energy converters, they only have 167 hit points, and they can die very quickly. So this is very, very weak. Wind turbines have 200. They're actually stronger than the converters themselves. So that might be a problem this game, but if not, either way, it's still a very dangerous thing to put these things together. I would try to put these converters away from the wind turbines and put the storage away from that stuff as well, so that stuff does not chain together if they die. Alright, so here you got your grunts moving out. I would say definitely have a radar. Okay, yeah, your radars feels a little bit late here. Reason being is like, you want to have a radar to see the, any incoming attacks before they get there. And that way the grunts that you have stationed here can parry the attack, can chase after or get in between the attacker and your buildings so that they don't kill your buildings, essentially, is what you want to do. Now, obviously in this position, there is a bit of a hill in your way. And there's even a minor bit of hill here. So your radar coverage that you're building in this position does not actually see stuff, within this whole area. So it's a big vulnerability at this bottom point, because of that. Now, obviously, having a radar is better than no radar, but again, like I was saying before, having a radar on the hill will cover the bottom side and the top side. So to me, a better plan would be, get this a little bit sooner. And I don't know if there is a spot, but if you can find a spot where it sees a little bit more of the bottom side, that's ideal. This is kind of far away to put it out here. So that's not exactly ideal either, but I mean, just having something, and that way you can at least see the top stuff coming in. And then prioritizing trying to get this area under control so that you can put a radar in this spot here. Because the radar coverage up here looks more like that. Now there's still a gap unless you put it like down here or something like that, which you could do. But this should give you a lot of good information, assuming that you're checking for it periodically. Alright, so you're getting some more cons on that radar. Oh yeah, I wanted to mention, so here you have 3 grunts going out, which is good. Usually you don't want to quite do it this way with them all together. Usually you want to have them spread out like this. Let's just erase this bit here and have them moving this way. So by doing that, basically you have vision of this entire area moving to the left. Which means any enemy units within the region, you're basically combing through it to make sure there's no scouts or anything that are A, trying to run by, or B, just hanging out. And that way, by doing so, you know that there's nothing coming this way, to attack anything, and that makes it safe. That makes everything you build back here safer, unless, of course, the grunt gets picked off or something like that. But yeah, as it is, it looks like he finds a lone blitz. See, your opponent kind of did that thing where they're more spaced out so they can see all this area, which is good. But then if something, if you see an opponent do something like this, you need to pull back and regroup to, properly fight. Now, luckily for you, they don't do that, and this blitz dies. So that's, of course, very good for you. So it ended up working out to your favor to having these three together. But at the same time, there could be a scout coming this way, you just don't know. And then again, they could easily pick this off, they could easily pick this off. And especially because you put your buildings together like this, if they saw these converters right by these wind turbines and target the converter, then all of a sudden all this dies. Except for the storage. The storage would probably live, unless it took some extra hits. But yeah, these converters die very quickly, so yeah, something that to be very mindful of. So let's see a couple of extra blitzes, so you kind of pull back. Okay. I think you're getting a little too eager with this. You're like trying to find damage. I mean, it's good that you're scouting and stuff. Yeah, it's very hard to because yeah, grunts do have slightly more range. They have 230, and I believe blitzes have like let's see, yeah, 180. So grunts do outrange them, but yeah, it's kind of hard because the blitzes are pretty fast as well, and it's not really easy to inflict damage without taking damage. But yeah, you move on. So yeah, I'd say this is good to get some information out here. And it's also good that you're moving your commander out, though I'll note again that this is a little bit late. And it's good that you're putting down this radar. I would argue because it's so late, try to get it sooner, the radar, that is. Like try to get it around here, maybe even like one up here. Like if you get it here, then you can put another one over here, and that'll cover your bottom side. But yeah, just having radar along so you can see stuff out here. Because if you don't know, you're just walking into the unknown. And what if it was like, say like 6 or 7 blitzes, and then they rush your commander. Sometimes when they do that, they look at the winds and they say, oh, the wind is low right now. They're not going to have enough for D-gun. Now all of a sudden your commander's out here alone and is basically dead. That's my crude drawing. Because you don't have a D-gun. But that's something to look out for. As it is, like, wind isn't, you have plenty of energy, so like it's okay. These blitzes can't really do that much. There's only 3 of them too, so not a big deal. So here you just saw your opponents come down here. There's a good chance that they're going to swing around this way. Oops. Alright, so good. You are responding to this. So yeah, having these grunts around, very good. By the way, it's kind of okay to have these grunts like back here, because that makes it so that as you parry those blitzes with these grunts, if they try to run back, now they have to run through these grunts. But normally you don't really want them to chase the blitzes. You don't want them to chase anything that's faster, because they just can't catch up. Now, blitzes, incisors, pawns, and grunts, they all move about the same speed, which means you basically won't catch up in time. So there's otherwise not really a good point to having them chase, by the way. So yeah, here they are. It looks like your grunts are a little bit out of position. Ideally, they'd be more set up here. So yeah, unfortunately you lose that. And then, yeah, a little bit slower to respawn, so now you lose this other mechs. And now they're targeting the winds, there goes all your wind, there goes your converters. And yeah, so that was actually exactly what I was talking about. You know, just stuff being able to swing in here and do that. And you did respawn, so that's good. It's just the response didn't quite get there to deal exactly what they needed to do. Or do what they needed to do. So you lost all this stuff. But unfortunate, but you do have a Geo coming up. Your energy looks okay for now. And you're adding on some wind back here? Yeah, that's all good stuff. Okay, here. So this is something you mentioned in the thread. So this is very important. So this move, you know, it's not always a good move to comp trade. But in this position, it is very good. Oops, I keep hitting that button by accident. Go back to your view. Okay. So the reason why this is very good in your position is A, it's very close to your base. It's not hard for you to reinforce this location. You know, it's on basically your half of the map, making it safer, but it's also on your half pretty close to your base. Secondly, you already have some units nearby to basically protect the wrecks afterwards. You know, and you want to obviously keep them outside of the commander range, or the explosion radius, I should say. Third, you already have a res bot that can come eat it really quickly. Looks like he's back here hanging out with some trees. And yeah, actually, I would say that since it's you that's, you know, wanting to comp trade, if you can remember to try to move this guy into position ahead of time. Just like, you know, move him. You know, I mean, you go above or below the hill, but like, you know, just somewhere back here. Oops. Somewhere back here, so that once the trade happens, you can start eating it immediately instead of having to run over. Now, obviously, you don't always have time for that kind of thing, but I'm just pointing that out as like something to think about if you're able to spend that bit of time doing that. All right, so yeah, that comp trade also very good because he had some blitzes in there. Now, obviously, not every opponent's going to have, you know, blitzes run into the explosion, but luckily you did. So that's all very good. The other good thing about it is you have a friendly commander nearby, and they can move position down here to either A, threaten the position here, which would make this safer for you, or they can come and help reclaim / secure the location. You know, so that's all very important to, you know, if you're this player, it's very important to try to help secure this. In fact, in higher level lobbies, it's not uncommon for there to A, be a comp trade, and B, seeing other enemy commanders go up there to you know, try to secure it, and then having those commanders blow up because they're trying to secure it and they comp trade, and then more commanders show up and then they explode because they're trying to eat it, and it's just like becomes this massive pile of metal that everyone's trying to get to. And it's quite funny to watch, but like, yeah, it's kind of nuts. But yeah, here you're doing a good job pushing your grunts forward like this to protect the area. So this is all very good. You see that bit of bottom area here. You can also assault. You see a constructor here. I mean, I personally would prioritize killing this constructor because they can actually eat the metal. But this is fine too because this is like a safer, you can just take this out really quick and then head back up here type of thing. So I guess I don't mind that either. But the important thing is you do not want to lose your grunts because you need your grunts to secure this. Picking off these pawns, that's fine. The enemy commander, I'll try to stay away from that because that would mean losing all your grunts. Like, even if you killed the commander, that means all your grunts are dead. You know, if you engage them at all your grunts are dead, basically. And then here, attacking these blitzes is a little bit eager because you just don't quite have enough. And even if you did, you'd be left with so few grunts that you can't really protect the wrecks very well. So I'd try to stay clear of something like that. But it is good that you're like pushing out here and securing this zone in front of the wrecks. Now, if you feel like your opponent is getting too close to the Rex and they have the potential of reclaiming it, like they have enough units to defend it and they can maybe push your res bots out or whatnot, I would suggest doing a play where you take a couple of your grunts and just like move them around, you know, in different areas. Now it's a bit harder to do because there's so many different groups moving in all these different directions, but if you're able to, basically by doing something like this, you're forcing response out of your enemy players. And either they, you know, if they're not good, they'll send their entire army after those units and just chase after them, and basically you make this whole area super secure. Or they respond properly and have to have units coming out to, you know, out of their factory to respond to those threats. Which, you know, it's a better play from them, but it'll still take their attention away from the center. So in a way, it does secure this. And with those grunts that you move out here, you just try to avoid dying. You know, that way you're just more annoying, and that way you take up their attention more, so that you have more time to eat these metals here. Unfortunately, your ally up here is just doing a normal thing, grabbing some stuff. I don't even know if they realize that there is some stuff here. By the way, when stuff like this happens, it's very good practice to communicate with your team. Just like ping, and like even just like a look here is fine. If you want to put it detail into it, you know, you just ping and you say, you know, Comrex or something, and you know, basically just let your team know. And then ideally they would have more attention to it so that they can protect it. Communication is very important. Nice bit of defense here. You're starting to eat it, or you're actually starting to eat the second one. Yeah, so you get both Rex, and you share some of it away to Flash and Skag. Now you might not have time to do this, but like, you know, zooming out just to see like who's going to need it, you know, and try to give it to the players that are going to need it more. Like for example, if someone was getting 2v1 or 3v1 or something like that, you want to give it to them. But if you don't have the time to do that, what you did is perfectly fine. You know, give it to the good players, especially someone like Flash or Skag. Like they know what they're doing, they'll spend it wisely. So very important that you did that, and yeah, I'm glad you did that. And you secured the Rex. So this is all very, very good stuff. So let's see, what are you spending that metal on? Looks like you're getting a bot lab, and you're adding on some more con turrets. Okay, so that's all very good as well. Since you have metal, it's fine that you keep this lab for now, but eventually you're going to want to reclaim it. Let's see. Yeah, it's just some light engagements. I would say try to get at least one constructor out here. You want to try to secure this mechs and these mechs at the front. But just having a constructor out here to build, you know, some turrets or something, you know, basically take over the job of the commander you lost. It won't be as good, but it'll be something, you know, and you can have units out to protect it. Because yeah, you're going to want to secure this front still, so that you have the metal coming in from those mexes. Alright, construction turrets. This feels a little bit eager. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You're going in different. I see you going in different directions with your grunts, which is all great. Again, having a radar anywhere in here, or even better, at the very least having one up here is very good, because you want to be able to see the dots out here. Now your ally has put down a radar here, so that's all very helpful. But to go to their view, the radar doesn't. I mean, it covers a nice portion of this bottom side for sure. But again, there is a vulnerability here. But yeah, ideally you'd also have a radar up here for just in case this one gets taken out, type of thing. Because having the information of where the dots are out here is super important. And you know, ideally with things like grunts and pawns and all that, you want to try to avoid battling with things like thugs and maces. Now, obviously, if you have overwhelming odds, then it's fine. Um, but yeah, ideally you want to run around them because they're slower, and basically just go in different directions, and be annoying if you're trying to do something like that. Take out things like this mechs and some of the mechs back here. Do more of a raid because they are more like raiding units, and they're good at they're good at like doing raids, and they're good at stopping raids because they're faster. Essentially, they're not good at battling. You want slower units for battling, essentially. Um, so here, especially after that first attack that wiped out some of your base here, something like this should be very, very, like this should grab your attention. There's a pile of units coming down here, which, they might just be securing this metal. But if I saw this if I were playing, I'd be like, oh shoot, I have this big vulnerability still. I need to build something or have some units to guard against, some problems there. Because if you start seeing a pile of units, especially on like the edge of the map like this, it usually means that they're going to do a raid. Which raids are, of course, a little bit stronger on map edges because there is nothing, you can't put anything down here, right? Because that's the end of the map. So inherently they already have more defense, or they're easier to, the raid has more of a chance of succeeding, essentially. Looks like your ally responds and starts taking some of those out, but looks like orange is going to go for it still. Yeah, and ideally when you see this stuff, like I think you're moving these down here, which is fine to stop like future raids and stuff, like if there was like a follow-up. But yeah, these guys are already down here, and ideally, if you start seeing something like this happen and you're producing, like say you didn't have this lab, if you're only producing like medium tanks that are slower, you want to quickly switch over to things like your your lighter, faster units to deal with this. Basically, you want some kind of answer to that, because as it is right now, all you have is this tower, which is useful. Having units around, of course, is useful too. You could select your grunts because they are faster as well, to go down there. If this happened to be where most of your building was, you could just put like, a couple of extra towers down really quick with all the build power that you have at your base. Obviously, that's not quite a reasonable response here because your build power is so far away from that location. But yeah, trying to get stuff out fast, the faster units out to deal with it, like the grunts and stuff. Looks like your ally is responding quite well. Constructor. Okay, constructor lives all's well. Let's see, so oh, okay, this is nice. They stop there for a moment, and your ally comes in here to help clean it up. Very nice. Very lucky for you they did that, because the grunts you had were not going to catch up in time. So another thing I want to point out really quick, this is really nice by the way, but to point this out really quick, once you use up your metal, it's going to be ideal to reclaim this lab, assuming that you want tanks. Basically you only want one lab, because that lab can be put into units. And, if you want medium tanks, you get more medium tanks and need the lab. This lab is 620 metal, and 620 metal can make, like 3 tanks-ish. Which is not insignificant. Like 3 brutes is pretty significant. Especially at this point when you don't have a lot of brutes or a lot of stuff. Before you eat this lab, you may want to consider just adding on a couple of res bots or something. Sometimes that's a bad idea, sometimes it's a good idea. If there's a lot of wrecks, or that there's going to be a lot of wrecks soon, then it's a good idea. And if there aren't a lot of wrecks, then My apologies. My headset died. I forgot to put a new battery in before I started this. Um, but yeah, eat your lab to produce more guys, type of thing. If someone has T2, I don't know if anyone has T2. Oh, okay, this guy has T2 already. Let's see. Okay. So you could potentially use that money to pay for T2 as well. Especially since you have so much support down here. Yeah, poor Flash up here. He's fighting against yellow, he's fighting against light pink, and he's fighting against brown. And looks like he's doing okay, so you know that all is well. Couple of things here though. I will say that there is a big vulnerability here, and this is mostly on your ally, because your ally's down here to help this. But something to be mindful of. I'm sure Flash is probably very mindful of that at the moment. But yeah, a raid could come in there, do some stuff. But yeah, otherwise it's fine to leave vulnerabilities, just gotta be mindful of it. But since you guys have 3 players down here, and they only have 2, it's going to be very important that your 3 players are not occupied with just 2 of them. You know, you don't want a stagnant 3v2. If you're the 3, you want to be pushing through that. If it's stagnant, that means it's good for the 2 players because they're holding the attention of 3 players. So essentially what you want to do is, you know, if you have 3 against 2, you want to push. Or if you can't push, you want to disperse so that there's more aid in this kind of area, type of thing. Because that would take some pressure off Flash, and then Flash could potentially put more economy into economy instead of producing units. It looks like Flash is... This is kind of one of the crazy things that high-end players will do. Just to point this out really quick. They'll do things like they'll have units on the fronts, you know, they'll have some raiding units to like defend against raids, but they won't like go in there and attack. They're sitting in a very defensive posture. You know, this is more for defense in case there is a raid. And they'll just get rid of a lab. And without that lab, now they can spend all that metal on building other stuff. Right now, I think Flash already asked for a T2, so that's where he's trying to put some metal into grabbing a T2 from this player. Which, yeah, he pinged right here with the T2 please. And, well, I guess he hasn't given the money yet, but I'm sure he plans to once he receives it. By the way, if you are the T2 player, it is very important to, you know, upgrade your mexes before giving out constructors. Now, if someone buys it, that's fine. You know, they paid for it, so like it doesn't really hurt your economy for upgrading your mexes. But if you do give them out, constructors are kind of expensive at T2. You know, 470 or 470 metal is quite a bit at this stage. So, but anyways, that's enough talking about other stuff going on the map. Let's talk more about Juniper and Friends and the engagements at the bottom here. Alright, so yeah, lots of grunts here still, which is good. You can use them to, you know, to do stuff. Like, as you push these commanders out and stuff, you know, obviously there's units here, and stuff like that. And then there's actually, looks like a raid coming in from that top that I was talking about. But as you guys push up and disperse some of these groups, there might be a nice window of opportunity to try to run your grunts in there. Now, obviously, that's going to be dependent on what kind of units these are too. Like if they're pawns and grunts themselves, they can easily respawn and close this gap. You know. But if they're slower, like they're thugs or something, then all of a sudden this is kind of wide open for that kind of composition. So then you can get faster units in there, like raiding units. So having these grunts is, you know, it kind of always threatens that possibility, and these players need to be mindful of that. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting into quite a few advanced topics here, but you know, just something to think about that basically has nothing to do with the analysis itself, but you know, whatever. Yeah, so things like this, I would say try to avoid. You know, blitzes are faster, and they're stronger than grunts. They're also more expensive, but you know, it's basically this many blitzes. It's going to take a lot more grunts to take these out, so this is kind of a waste in a way. And it looks like you do some damage here. Actually, you come out on top a bit here. Denoted by that. This I would say is too eager. Mainly because you don't have vision of the area. Now, I'd like to see players try stuff like this when it's with cheaper units like grunts. But yeah, just having some kind of radar up here before you do something like that would make this more easy to do. There's just like a lot of you don't know what's there, so like you could just feed them a bunch of units. So yeah, I get some value down there. But yeah, I guess that the other thing to consider too is by doing that swing around with the grunts and stuff. You know, obviously you ran into units and they all died, and that sucks, and it wasn't good that you did that because of that reason, but you don't know that. But the other thing to consider that makes it kind of good as well is you guys have stuff pushing along the bottom here. So in a way it's a distraction play. But you know, considering that it's a distraction play or that it's useful in a distraction kind of way, you know, I would try not to do it this way. Don't do that. Instead, go up this way. Basically, you know, basically go up and then down. Or if you want, you can continue on in other directions as well. But basically, you're trying to get them to respond to the grunts. And then these tanks and stuff down here can actually get in there and do more damage, essentially. Oh, nice little bombing on pink here from green. And commander, okay, reasonable job taking that out. If you still have that res bot, you could be sending that up there. Okay, so you do. So yeah, this would be like, you know, another reason why you'd want those res bots before you get rid of this factory. Now, obviously, you don't know that you're going to be able to get that far in there, and oftentimes you can't. But knowing that it's 3 against 2, there is that possibility of basically crushing it down this lane here. You know, so having some res bots, knowing that there's going to be battling and Rex places, you know, of course, very good. You don't want to go too crazy with it, obviously, because then obviously you don't have as many units and stuff. But you know, having a couple extras, I think would help out a little bit here. But yeah, the main thing is to get rid of the lab so that you have just more stuff out here. Your ally has quite a bit here as well, so you guys are able to do quite a bit. Nice, you find a T2. Yeah, so this was actually perfectly timed out. I don't know if that was intentional or not. But yeah, when someone tries to go T2, they're vulnerable for quite a while. You know, because A, the lab takes a while to build, and then once the lab's done, you want the constructor, and then with the constructor, well, you kind of want the T2 economy so that you can make T2 units and all that. So there's this long vulnerability time, and it's hard to do it safely. And considering there's 3 of you presents down here, I think probably when he started building this, I would say this is very incorrect timing. Like it should have been abundantly clear that, you know, they should not have the T2 at this point. Yeah. You and friends being Brackle 3, you know, doing some damage here. Quite a few beamers here to defend. But here comes the grunts, and you got some medium tanks back here as well to help out. Yeah, now there's like a nice big bit of metal here to eat up. Looks like you lost the res bot, I guess? Oh no, he's over here. Just chilling. Big bombing on green here. Retaliation for the bombing over at the top. Let's see, I'm gonna slow down just a little bit, see what you're doing. Yeah. Too many labs, I feel. But I mean, you are doing some stuff with your tanks. I mean, it's kind of nice having some pawns and stuff. Or I should say grunts. I would argue that these lashers, for what you're trying to get done, I would say this is not necessarily a good thing. because they're so slow and they're not assault units by any means. They're like the furthest away from something you want to push with. Um, so things like lashers and artillery are great for. I mean, they're kind of like skirmishing, right? Because they're like running. You know, they're good at engaging from a distance. They don't do a lot of damage, but they can engage from distance and be annoying. Anyone that's not watching their units on the front. You know, they're also good against statics and stuff like that, especially the artillery piece. But you know, lashers here can't really do too much. They could maybe help out with this a bit, but I think your whole goal is to keep pushing here. And in fact, once you break a position like this, it's kind of nice to get some faster units going. So here you'd maybe want to prioritize grunts, or if you did what I was saying before and got rid of the factory, you'd want to prioritize things like incisors. And then just like, you know, send them down this way and then up. Let me get rid of some of these scribbles. So you send them down and then up. Because basically people are held in place at the front line, you know, because they're engaged with the, you know, the person on the opposite side. So it's very hard for them to respond and defend this area, right? You know, so basically this whole side is vulnerable. It becomes a nice flank for your units to come up here and do some damage. So having faster units to be able to just do that for free and very quickly is kind of nice. And obviously, you know, if it's just grunts or something like that, then, you know, obviously they could just build a couple of light laser towers. So there is reason to not do it with grunts and instead do it with, like, say, medium tanks. By the way, when I say grunts here, I mean, like, I don't just mean grunts or pawns. I mean, you know, those faster rating units. You know, being incisors, blitzes, grunts, and pawns. So just, yeah, get in here. But yeah, there is something to be said about using bigger units like a medium tank to do it as well. But again, lasher is not really what you want here unless you're trying to take this out. And in fact, like, even if you're trying to take this out, I would still go with a medium tank. Mostly because if you're assisting this player and it becomes like a 2-on-1 in this location, you want something that can quickly just ram through and destroy stuff in the back, right? And that would be things like medium tanks would be good for that. Whereas lashers, they'll take a long time and you know, they'll eventually kill this army, but they just don't do it very quickly. So you want something more aggressive in a way. Yeah. Yeah, that's just more like, you know, talking about getting the right unit for the job in a way. But yeah, as it is, Pink doesn't really need help with this either. I mean, they got fiends up here and it's just pawns sitting here, so I mean, yeah. It's already, this entire area is very vulnerable. Obviously, a lot of destruction here, and some destruction here already. Looks like you ended up moving your tanks around the brown units, which is perfectly acceptable, and just going around this way. Why are they all missing? Are they on, like, forced attack or something? I'm not quite sure, but oh, here's another player going T2. This is too many players going T2. For you guys watching, in case you don't know, if you go T2 on a lane map like this, announce it. Say, hey, I'm going T2, which should signal to everybody that they should not go T2 and instead should pay you for a T2 con. Because building the lab and stuff makes you so vulnerable for so long. So with 2 people down here going T2, that's 2 vulnerabilities. Since they're the only 2 players down here, that basically means you guys have free reign to come here and just kill them. Okay. Good, it looks like OPS is still going. Alright, so Brown's dead now. Now you guys can move on, and there's the resign. So, you know, you guys weren't the only ones to break the fronts. You know, obviously Green did some nice bombing runs, got a little bombed on themselves. Flash did a great job here, holding against 3 players basically, who apparently just didn't push in. And that's kind of, you know, just an OS difference. You know, Flash being so good, and these 3 players here, you know, being a little bit lower in OS for sure. and not feeling comfortable pushing Flash. So Flash got away with just not having a lab for a while, and ended up being able to greed for some T2 economy. But yeah, a lot of it had to do with just the T2 timing of these two players, and the fact that they're both doing it. It's kind of probably a really really big deal with all this. They just didn't have enough units to really do anything. But going back to you and talking about, I wanted to talk about this a little bit too, actually, before I get into the summary. So when you get a T2 lab, actually, there's actually a lot of stuff I want to talk about back here that I have missed. First of all, if you're buying a T2 con, I assume that you bought this. Okay, so you paid right where? Okay, here we go. So you paid. Let's see, it looks like you didn't get it for a little bit, unfortunately. Yeah, I would say if you're gonna pay for one, it's a good habit to like ping it and say, like, can I buy T2? And then you just give them the money right after that. And that way their attention is on the fact that you want to buy, and they'll see that you paid. Otherwise, they might miss it, type of thing. And it's just good to communicate stuff like that to make sure. But yeah, now that you have your T2, and by the way, if anyone is an air player, like this player is an air player, ask for T2 transport, which is freaking OP. It's super OP when you get your T2 con, because otherwise your T2 con is very slow moving, and by the time they get from the factory here all the way down here, it's been like several minutes, and then you're finally upgrading your mechs. It's a long, long time in a lot of cases, and so having a transport, pick up your con and place it here is going to be a lot faster. Now, obviously, that's going to take some getting used to if you're not used to doing stuff like that, but it is very good to do stuff like that. But yeah, also I would recommend, if you can, and this is kind of a slight thing, but if you can, try to place these consorts in between the mexes, like you have this mex here and this mex here. But if they can basically hit both mexes, then they can assist the upgrade of both. So to me in this position, it'd be more ideal to put, like your factory placement, I guess, is fine, but you could put your consorts down here a little bit more, or even better, you could put them like down here so they hit all three of these mexes, this one included. And that way, when you get your T2, like I see you moving them down here to upgrade these mexes. But ideally, the first mexes you upgrade should be the ones with your build power attached to them, basically, which is going to be the three you start with, essentially, is how it works out usually. And that way you can spend all your build power on those mexes. So basically, what I'm saying is you could prioritize those mexes so you get them faster, and that way you get the economy to basically roll out with either more units of T1 or to roll out with T2. But yeah, that's just like a bit of a switch around so that it comes out a little bit better or a little bit faster. And in fact, doing it like this is actually quite a bit faster, especially with the transport and things like that. Also, I mean, here you have a bit of metal. I think your labs were idle for a while, and I think part of that was to pay for the T2, but also part of it is to I don't know, they're just idle, I guess. But yeah, usually you want to eat your labs as you upgrade your mexes, so that you can upgrade those mexes faster. And when it comes to when it comes to upgrading these back mexes, try to have constructors assist these so that they upgrade it ASAP. Basically, what you want to do is get these mexes ASAP, like by any means necessary, or whatever whatever you can do to get it faster is good. Because each of these upgraded mexes are 4 times more metal income. And then they also eat up extra energy, and then you're going to want extra energy for T2 stuff, so you could kind of want a fusion as well, which of course costs a bunch of metal. Especially since you lost a bunch of your wind turbines. Obviously you have some back here, and this is a reasonable stack, but it's not like a ton. Like it's enough to maybe get you started with T2 units, but it's not really enough to sustain heavier, costlier T2 units. So either A, getting that fusion if you don't have a ton of wind turbines, or B, um, even having a second con out here producing winds, because wind is so good on this map. It's in fact more cost efficient than fusions. And in fact, I think that's 14-2. I'm just gonna have to check really quick. Sorry. Uh, I always forget the numbers, but it's pretty close to being as efficient as an APHIS in terms of metal. Now, obviously, there's a lot of wind turbines you need to make in order to equate an APHIS, but so there is a huge build time cost, but they are efficient in terms of metal. When that's 12. Wait, oh, your Cortex though, so I'll have to look at the other one. My apologies that this is taking a minute. I just want to get the numbers straight so that I don't tell you something incorrect. All right, so advanced fusion for Armada wind speed needs to be at least 11.4 to equate it in terms of metal. 13.9 for core. Here the average wind speed is 14.2, so the wind here is technically better than an APHIS. So just to keep that in mind, like it is good to just like on maps like this to just add on as much wind as you can. Now obviously that's going to cost you in the early game, to have extra metal and to have extra, stuff like that. To offset that, you can get converters with high winds like this. Just for all the excess that you have. But yeah, ideally you want to build up, like start building up your economy for T2. And essentially, with everything that I've said here with the mexes and stuff, trying to get that stuff ASAP, you don't really want to build the T2 lab right now. This is a very expensive thing, and ideally you want to put all that metal into upgrading mexes to have it sooner. And right now you do have a chunk of metal because you stopped producing units, but not every situation is going to be where you have like a bunch of units already pushing up at fronts and stuff like that. And so ideally you just have more build power helping this guy out to use that metal quickly. And when your metal's gone, start eating these labs for sure. And upgrading them ASAP and then adding on like a fusion or something. Oh yeah, you have the Geo here. Yeah, so the Geos actually should take priority over the fusion because they are way less expensive than a fusion. Yeah, upgrading that stuff super fast. If you do end up getting that transport, you can move your T2 con around to upgrade the mexes a little bit faster too. So you can like micro your macro in a way. But yeah, this T2 lab definitely is a no. Because you're just kind of wasting a lot of metal on that. In fact, some good players, in fact, Flash kind of did this during this game, where he gets rid of his lab and just starts upgrading everything. And then once things are upgraded and he needs units, then building on a new lab. Looks like he's building some construction turrets to kind of gear up for having a lab. Or maybe just greeting for an APHIS right away or something like that, because you guys are winning so hard. But yeah, good players will, like if they're the ones that have to build the T2, they'll do things like build the T2 lab, build the constructor, build the metal storage, and then eat the lab. The metal storage is necessary because otherwise, even with the commander, you'll overflow a bunch of metal and you won't have it anymore. So you get a metal storage with it before eating the lab. But you eat the lab after the constructor so that you have metal to upgrade your mexes and things more efficiently. And just get them right away and get the fusion right away. And then once you have some solid economy going, then you build the lab back. Because otherwise this lab's just going to sit here and do nothing. And if you try to do something with it and you don't have these things upgraded, there's not too much that you can do because these units are fairly expensive. If you had to get units, like I'd say, a couple of Quakers or, something cheap like that, You know, because a lot of this other stuff is very expensive. Like, you know, Banisher is 1,000, a Tiger is 665, Zara is 1,650. Like these, you know, that's a way more metal than your, you know, the like, uh, than things like Brutes that are like 200 some. You know, so like you can't really use this unless it's going to be cheap units like that, which wouldn't really be ideal if you're trying to upgrade your mexes ASAP. Um, so I hope that makes sense with all this T2 stuff. But yeah, ideally you wouldn't have any of these labs um, while you're doing it. And that's kind of highlighted here by Flash not having any of that. Let's see, what is Green doing? Green is just producing T1 while he does it. And that way he can push as well as upgrade his mexes. Um, so yeah, there's different ways to do it, but this is just not ideal. Um, Essentially, I would say that there's um, basically in every game there should be two things to keep in mind. Do I need units or do I need economy? Or, you know, like basically if I build units, what can I do with those units? Do I need them for defense? Can I possibly attack with them? And this is going to come with experience to know whether or not you can push a position. In this case, it was 3 against 2, so that was a very push-worthy kind of scenario. But you know, might not, you know, it's not always like that either. So you know, you might find yourself in like a more of a stalemate in middle, in which case you might feel safe enough to go for T2 economy and stuff like that. You know, in which case you want to stop producing units altogether and build on economy. And then, you know, you want to be very vigilant of the middle and see, you know, anytime you feel threatened, you say, okay, I need to stop producing economy and build units. And you go back to units. Um, and so having things like construction turrets by your labs um, and by where you're producing energy or where you're producing resources is very good. So you can like move your construction turrets to say like, hey, I want you to help out with units right now. And it's like, oh, I feel good. Let's stop producing units. Let's have these construction turrets help out with building wind or advanced solar or you know, T2 economy or something like that. And it's just like a safer way to, you know, it takes some awareness for sure. It takes some know-how of like what can you get away with. You know, so it takes experience, but ideally it's kind of like you want to do one or the other and not both. And if you're doing both, you know, some situations do call for both. Um, like you kind of need to add on some units for defense, like in case they do, because you're at such a less stalemate. Um, you know, and that's fine too. It's just, you know, be mindful of, you know, you can do switches like that. Um, yeah, this has already gone way longer than I expected it to. So really quick to kind of sum up some of the other stuff I was talking about, you know, before all this T2 nonsense. A, get your radar sooner so that you can see what's coming, and then you can respond with the grunts that you have. 3 grunts before any constructors feels a bit much. I mean, all you really have to worry about that early is a couple of, you know, by then the most they can have is like 2 scouts. So you don't need 3 grunts because 1 grunt can take care of all that. But given that you got this hill and you basically have 2 sides to protect, you know, having 2 is okay. I don't mind 2 in that kind of scenario. But yeah, usually I'd say a radar and 1. And then you just watch out for attacks and with the radar, you know, and then use a grunt to like parry the attack wherever it may be. But yeah, because of this hill, radar's not going to be as good here, so having more grunts is fine. And you know, trying to get a radar on this hill ASAP to see stuff coming, very important. Because then you can respond more quickly. Now, if you find yourself having a hard time responding to raids coming down here, you know, try to get a constructor or something to place a tower in this region to prevent those raids. At least 1 tower. If you feel like you're going to get raided by heavier stuff, you might need more stuff down there, but ideally you want to do less, you know, less is more. You want less towers down there so they can spend more metal on units at the top and stuff like that. Yeah, things like the comm trade were good. Oh yeah, the construction turret was a bit early. you couldn't really utilize it. I would try to prioritize grabbing the mexes up here and back here. Um, I actually greed pretty heavily sometimes when I play. I'll do things like the first three things out of my factory are constructors, and it's like super unsafe in a way. But then it's like I have a radar down, I can see something coming, and I'm mindful of it. Then it's like, oh, I see a dot. Let's build an incisor really quick. Let's build a pawn really quick, and then parry the attack. Um, or I'll put down like a fast turret or something like that. Putting all the available build power on producing that turret ASAP to protect my stuff. Um, but yeah, that's actually a really important thing for players that are in the top eight or in the higher OS. Um, because that way they can greed for more economy and less units or less defense. Um, let's see what else was there. I'm gonna check my notes really quick. Yeah, just like doing stuff like eating the things you don't need. Again, these solars, you absolutely do not need them at this time. You haven't needed them for quite a while. That's 300 metal that's sitting there. That could have been another tank or some faster wind turbines or something like that. So just be mindful of that. And then even more so with the labs. This is 620 with this lab. I believe the vehicle lab, yeah, 720, 620, 720 metal. So you can get that full cost back if you reclaim them. So that's kind of important. Overall, with how you microed your grunts and stuff, I like it. I'm glad that you're more aggressive with it. Not everyone is. Some people just end up building some units and just like leaving them out somewhere. And it's like, well, they're not really doing anything. Why even have them? But you were very active with it, so that's very good. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, I would also try to prioritize coming out here a little bit sooner with your commander. And if you do things with comm trades, it's still important to get a constructor out here, mainly because you want the mexes, but also to help secure the area. And then if you and or your teammates end up pushing down here, you can keep grabbing territory. And if you ever feel threatened, then you put down more light laser towers, which you're doing here. So I mean, I'm not saying that you're not doing that stuff. It just could have been a little bit sooner. Let's see. I talked about the explosion radius stuff, so again, just to talk about that again really quick, you hold X and space, that'll produce this radius. Usually the inside one is the death radius, and the outside one is if it's self-destructed. And then to look at the damages for that, it's shift and space. Mexes, they only do 89 damage within 90 AoE if they're killed. But if they self-destruct, then they do 390 damage within 120 AoE. So that's actually a good way to take out ticks and stuff that are harassing it. You just self-destruct it, and that can probably kill several ticks and stuff like that. That's very mex specific. Mexes actually detonate after only like 1 second or 2 seconds or something like that. Much quicker than a lot of other things. Let's see, the comm trade was really good. But yeah, you guys had a nice push at the bottom and helped to win the game that way. So very nice job. Anyways, I hope you guys learned some stuff from this. I know I kind of went crazy and talked about a ton of different stuff. Yeah, I need to get better at shortening these videos and making it a little bit more concise. But I feel the need to explain and go over these details so that it makes more of a, so that hopefully it clicks more in your brain. But if you have any questions or don't quite understand something, definitely feel free to ask me. No shame in asking any of that stuff. I know sometimes I ramble, so I just hope you guys got something out of this. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.